Hello, today we are on Lesson 30, Adding and Subtracting Fractions and Adding and Subtracting Fractions with Unequal Denominators. Some warm-up questions. What is a denominator? Denominator is the bottom part of a fraction. It tells us how many equal parts our whole is divided into. And the numerator is the top part of your fraction, which just tells us how many of those parts we're actually considering or dealing with. Learning objectives today are to add and subtract fractions with like denominators, to add and subtract fractions with unlike denominators, and to find the least common denominator. So to start, we have fractions with like denominators. We have, and like denominators just means equal denominators. The denominators are the same or common. So here we have 1/6 and we're adding 4/6. Pretty simple. You just add how many pieces you have and keep the denominator the same. So we end up with 5/6. So our rule when adding or subtracting fractions with like denominators, keep the denominator the same, add or subtract the numerators. For example, 3/7 plus 2/7, add the numerators, you get 5, and the denominator stays the same, so 5/7. Now, when we have unequal denominators, in order to add or subtract fractions, they must have the same denominator, which means that we're going to have to transform one or both of your fractions as needed. And we should remember that to rename a fraction, you can keep its value the same by multiplying or dividing the numerator and denominator by the same number. And think of this, like if ever you have a number and you multiply it by 1, you just end up with the same number that you started with. So multiplying a fraction by 2/2, for example, is just like multiplying the number by 1 because 2/2 is 1. And this is how we can rename our fraction but keep the value of it the same. And what we want to do is we want to find the least common denominator. We want to find the smallest multiple of all the denominators in order to rename your fraction. So here, finding the lowest common denominator, we have 1/3 plus 1/4. So you could start listing multiples of 3, 3, 6, 9, 12, and your multiples of 4, 4, 8, 12. And we see that the first number that they have in common as a multiple is 12. So that is the least common multiple of 3 and 4. So therefore, our least common denominator in our fraction is going to be 12. And if you need a refresher on how to find the least common multiple, you can go back to lesson 20 and just get a refresher on that. So in this case, our 1/3, we want to change it to a fraction with 12 in our denominator. So where we would multiply our denominator by 4, which means we need to also multiply our numerator by 4 to keep the fraction equivalent. So that would end up being 4/12. And then our 1/4, we need to multiply both numerator and denominator by 3 to keep our fraction equivalent. So that would be 3/12. And then we're just treating it like common denominators. So we just add our numerators and keep that denominator the same. So 7/12. And here we're subtracting. So we need to find a common denominator for 6 and 4. In this case, that would be 12. So we need to multiply both numerator and denominator by 2. So that would make this 10/12. And then our 1/4, we're multiplying both numerator and denominator by 3. So that gives us 3/12. So our least common denominator is 12. And then we rename our fractions, 10/12 minus 3/12. That ends up equaling 7/12. And always when we're dealing with fractions, we want to simplify. So if you have 9/10 minus 4/10, you have 5/10, but this is not a simplified answer. We can reduce that to 1/2. If we divide both numerator and denominator by 5, you end up with 1/2. So here's our recap steps to remember when adding and subtracting fractions. Find the lowest common denominator if they don't already have an equal denominator. Then rewrite each fraction with the new denominator and new numerator. Add or subtract. And finally, simplify. So here are the practice problems from your book. Pause the video and work out these problems and press start when you're ready to check your answers. Okay, 3/4 minus 2/5. Our common denominator here is going to be 20, so we would rename 3/4 to 15/20. And 2/5 we're multiplying by 4, so that would be 8 over 20. And then we're subtracting. 15 minus 8 is 7. So you end up with 7/20, and that cannot be reduced anymore. So there's our final answer. Next, we have 3, 2, and 4 for our numerators. Our least common denominator here is going to be 12. So let's rewrite. 5/3 will be multiplying by 4. So we're going to have 20/12. And 1/2 would be the same as 6/12. And then subtracting a 4th, we're multiplying by 3 over 3, so 3/12. And then we're just looking at our numerators. 20 plus 6 is 26, minus 3 is 23. 23/12. But this is not simplified, so 12 goes into 23 one time, and there would be 11 remainder, so 11/12. 1 and 11/12. That's our final simplified answer on that one. Next, we have 8, 2, and 4 as our denominators, so least common denominator here would be 8, so we can keep the 5/8 the same. 1/2 would be 4/8. And 1/4 would be 2/8. And now we can subtract. 5 minus 4 is 1, plus 2 is 3/8. And is that simplified? Yep, that's our final answer. And lastly, we have 3, 4, and 5 as our denominators, so least common multiple here. Let's see, 3 and 5 are prime. 4 would be 2 squared, so we need to actually multiply all of these denominators. 4 times 5 is 20, times 3 is 60. So 60 is our least common denominator here. So 2/3 would be 40/60. And then we'll be multiplying by 15 here to get 60. 3 times 15 is 45. And then this one we'd be multiplying by 12, so 12/60. So now we have 40 plus 45 is 85, minus 12 would be 73. So 73/60. Here we need to simplify that because that is an improper fraction. So 60 goes into 73 one time, and then you have 13 remaining. So 13/60, which can't be reduced anymore. So 1 and 13/60 is our final answer there. All right, that's all for today. So your assignment is to do problem set 30, and then go ahead and read lesson 31 in your textbook before your next lesson. Have a good day.